Hey there, welcome to episode 87 of the Quaggling Sand audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this at just about 11:30 in the morning on July 9th. If I can type the correct date in here. July 9th. It's a Wednesday. Pardon me. Wednesday, July 9th, 2025. Time is flying. Fun or not. In case you have never heard the Quaggling Sand audio program before, if you're new to this program, Quaggling Sand is a technical term I coined when I was very young. It refers to something you may refer to as pins and needles, the return of circulation to usually a limb. Sometimes I wonder about the return of circulation to one's head, but usually it's a hand or a foot or a leg or an arm or something that you've been laying on or has been otherwise cut off, not physically, but from circulation, gone numb. And as circulation returns, the feeling, again, so often called pins and needles, but in fact, quaggling sand. You can use it. It's a technical term. You're free to toss it around, get it out there. More people should be using correct terminology for such things. Today's title and topic, Lotus Notes at Philips, will be a story about my time at Philips Components, the Flat Display Systems Group, and the joy of company email, of Lotus Notes, and corporate IT chaos. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, which itself contains a summary, which I'll read, and the links for today's episode, 4 shameless self-promotion and 1 Wikipedia link about non-internet email addresses. So let us begin. The nice thing about global technology companies, they have so many layers of middle management spread around the world that each require convincing that the other layers are broken. ... The links for today's episode, the first 2, buymeacoffee.com/danhugo, my profile with various links to my various audio programs, different projects, affiliate links to my favorite coffee beans available from Amazon. Those are my favorite coffee beans that are available from Amazon. Those are 2 different sets, perhaps. And of course, the Dan Hugo link plus /posts. So buymeacoffee.com/danhugo/posts is where you will find the Buy Me an Update audio program published on Monday mornings, usually in the morning. A brief 5 minutes or less recap of the previous week's audio program topics and any news and announcements upcoming. So buymeacoffee.com/danhugo and /posts, danhugo/posts. I'm going to consolidate that because I spend too much time telling you these things, but the take home, you do not need to spend any money here to get this information. Everything is free. You're welcome to contribute to the cause. Everything that comes in through buymeacoffee.com and or ko-fi.com. Any funds go towards coffee or coffee accessories. It's what keeps all of this moving. The next 2 links, ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com. The hyphen is next to the 0 on most keyboards. ko-fi.com/danhugo. But the part of it I use more often, so this is probably the link that will stay, is Coffee Solo, a no schedule, no agenda, no fixed topic audio program that's published through the ko-fi.com platform, ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/danhugo/posts, whatever comes into mind. And if I feel like creating an audio program episode, there it is. Finally, the old email address schemes link on Wikipedia. It will tell you about some other addressing schemes that didn't make the cut. The format we all use today, user at, so for example, dhugo@quagglingsand.com. was actually developed, you can read about this in the Wikipedia article, was developed or conceived, I should say, by someone at ARPANET in the 70s. Do I still have that page open? No. Wait, do I? No, I do not. Oh, well. So you can check out the Wikipedia page. I think it was 1971. The whole reason ARPANET, the DARPA, University Defense Contractor Connection Network, was designed so that people could share information. So messaging was a big thing back then. That's how we got here today. CC mail is one of the listed items there, and that will make an appearance in this first part of this story. CC mail from Lotus. So let's get started with this story. The early days of corporate mail were interesting. I had just graduated from college where we were using the Wild West internet. There's no browsers, a lot of terminal interfaces, command line, a lot of text. There was no browsing yet, but all sorts of tools to communicate between colleagues, colleges, college students. If I was talking to somebody at a company, I probably would have done that too. Email that used an internet that we know today was just beginning to really catch on between normal people, with BitNet addresses and other lingering interoperability issues still shaking out. If you don't know what BitNet is, that's okay. When I was a consultant for the computer science department at Harvey Mudd College, work study. And in the computer workstation room, there was a big poster with the various pieces of what would become the internet. So different networks, different addressing schemes, different messaging, different everything. And they all had to come together into what we call the internet. There was a time when the internet...
That's an interesting
oh no!
perspective on the development.
Computer, stop.
Are you looking...
Is that annoying or what? By the way, I upgraded to Amazon Plus and I already don't like it. I hope it heard me. I don't even use it. It's not worth it. So yeah, I just entering the workforce in 1993, if you're curious. When I joined my first company in Silicon Valley, it was indeed in 1993, I was presented with Lotus CC Mail, a proprietary messaging platform that used its own mail server and client tools and whatnot. It ran on the Mac. Unfortunately, I was still a Mac fan back then, as was the company I started working for. Again, we were in a transitional period, so this was a tool that worked in its own world. So you could send electronic mail messages between users within that world. You could email anyone at the company through CC Mail. By the way, CC Mail had a fun little feature where you could unsend messages, since it was all, on a server that was completely controlled by the company in this case. So I could send, this was told to me by the person I worked for's boss, if that makes sense. He said, oh yeah, you can send email to someone and CC their manager or the president of the company or whatever. You CC them, and then after you send it, you unsend it to the CC. So they think you carbon copied their boss, and you did not. Good times. Production by Street. Anyone who was using AOL back in the day may remember there was a little bit of pain getting AOL users onto the internet. Put that in quotes if you like, with internet-friendly email addresses and emailing, not to mention web browsing and whatnot. My first employer and their CC Mail use was sort of similar, I suppose. Making use of this tool and intra-company email was not yet in the it just works category, to be sure. Someday, but not back then. So we had to work around. We're using CC Mail, but I need to contact someone at Apple, for example. So for big companies, this was not a big deal because most messaging was going to be intra-company anyway. In the early days, people were still sending faxes. They were still picking up a phone and speaking. They were having conference calls. Polycom, of course, would continue to be a very successful company because of their room microphones to enable voice calls. The culture of big companies would not be changing so quickly as with smaller companies. If you were at Apple back then, you could drive. If you were at Apple back then, you could use Apple Link, which enabled people from partner companies, developer communities, and so on to join that platform and message with that world. So if I needed to contact someone at Apple about a driver or about some QuickTime thing or whatever in that first company, I could contact them on Apple Link. So I had an Apple Link account. We all did. So problem solved, right? You just have to have an email address for everything, every different thing you want to interact with. Not an email address, an Apple Link address, a CC Mail address, whatever. Sort of like AOL for Apple people. So it was an internal Apple Link platform that could accept external people and accounts for this communication. I had to use Apple Link now and then, and so I did. You could also share files and so on. So it was probably very similar to not the consumer side, but just the communication tools of AOL. Kind of the same idea, from what I recall. Some would use the really OG stuff like CompuServe, and a lot of people, myself included, would use their college email addresses to communicate with people out on the internet. because college email addresses were internet addresses. They were real. For the longest time, I was dhugo@hmc.edu. And I was also dhugo@jarthur.hmc.edu. And those email addresses lasted for a long time. I doubt they're still around, but so that's the email address I was using for anything that needed a real proper SMTP email transaction to take place. There you go. Obviously, this was not ideal for companies to have their employees communicating outside of the company, using platforms they had no control over, exchanging who knows what in terms of confidential, even secret information like financials, intellectual property, gossip, or of course, people were trying to arrange lunch meetings and trade show materials. Well, that's probably more likely, isn't it? Some combination of these, perhaps. Eventually, while closed platforms for internal messaging were preferred by some paranoid IT people to maintain that wall around the company business, that's the way it is. The internet was coming, and fast. With Netscape about to upend everything in 1996, when they went public, they actually released the first browser in 1994, and that was the Mosaic browser. It was making the rounds in 1994, and I was working at Apple and Mariani 1 at the time. I've told that story about trying out Mosaic on my little Mac 2, what is it? LC2? Yeah, the Mac LC2, a totally underpowered little machine with a little 12-inch monitor. It was just my machine for filing bugs. But I tried it out there. I had access to the internet. So it began. And Netscape would have an email client too. But using the larger internet at work was kind of a brand new thing. Certainly messaging, quite foreign to some people. So, and then there was Philips. So UMax was shutting down their computer design business in the US. So we all jumped over to Philips Electronics. I think it was in 1998 sometime, with a site in the US not far away in San Jose. UMax was based in Santa Clara, very near the 49ers Stadium location today, across the street from Great America. I've told that story as well. There was a Philips Semiconductor site in Palo Alto, which was actually pretty interesting and a pretty cool building, a cool structure, a cool location, some trees and whatnot. It was lovely. But we were going to be in the Philips Flat Display Group, which was part of Philips Components and not Philips Semiconductor. We would be based in the San Jose location, which was all business, as in accounting, HR, procurement, sales, marketing, not so much in the way of on-site engineering. We took over a windowless lab space on the ground floor just off the lobby, which meant we were highly visible for gossiping purposes. So much complaining that we were always showing up after 9 a.m., sometimes as late as 10:30 in the morning. Oh my goodness. Unfortunately, no spies were working at 9 p.m., the typical end of the day when I was leaving work, for example. Yeah, half the story always sounds better than the whole thing. Philips was at the time, so my point here is that they had a very stodgy culture, a little bit of a throwback, not totally on board with how innovation was working in Silicon Valley. Philips was at the time a substantial global company with something like 160,000 people across all of their business units. Philips Components, Philips Electronics, Philips. Philips Electronics was Royal Philips Electronics. That was an American corporation. Philips Components, Philips Medical, Philips Research, Philips. I think there were 5, maybe 7. I can't remember. So there was 160,000 people all around the world, and they had a global IT services company that managed. It was an external sort of. I think they actually acquired them, but they remained as a subsidiary or whatever that game is, because they were an international. Philips being international, they had this international requirement, so that the way it was structured depended on probably where you were. But being old school as they were, they had this global IT company. And I do not remember what it was called. I probably blocked that out. It started with an R, I know that for sure. It may as well have been called Really, as in really. So that's what we'll call it today. The Y2K fast approached. We were getting awfully close to the year 2000. We were in the heart of Silicon Valley, yet we were forced to use the global messaging platform of choice, Lotus Notes. And remember CC Mail from my first company, this in 1993. This was its longer lasting cousin. Notes would be purchased by IBM And I think now it's maintained by some other company for anybody hanging on for dear life to this platform. So we used Lotus Notes to communicate across the various Philips properties and personnel. No, it was not 1993 anymore. It was 1999. Internet email was most definitely in use. And while secure email and intellectual property policies were still swirling around a bit in different quarters, the ability to email between companies was generally okay. Like you could do it. You could do it if you were allowed. Not so much at Philips, which as a company did not have a proper directory. If I wanted to find someone working at the Philips Research Lab in Red Hill in England, we needed to go there or know someone and call them on the phone. We did both of those in the first week forming our software and electronics business unit there in San Jose. We literally got on a plane like the second or third day after we signed all of our job offers and whatever. Company culture was very in-person oriented with Philips. The notion of emailing just anyone inside the company was curious. Why would you send an email? Just call me. The notion of emailing people outside of the company was almost unthinkable. Unfortunately, there was not enough email going into and out of the company with other companies to have any attention paid to this. Again, culture leaned heavily towards phone, fax, talk to each other. But I quickly discovered that addressing a message to a proper external internet, SMTP or RFC 5321 and 5322 formatted email address would appear to be sent. It just would not be delivered ever. So what was up with that? And by the way, I don't really clarify this through this story, but if there's an expected behavior and it doesn't happen, you should always let the user know that it didn't happen. So sending an email, email sent, and you never learn that, it was undeliverable. And nowadays, this is something we all see now and then. The user's email address was unknown, or their email box may be full, or you'll get a few different responses that will end up in your email box, undeliverable. Right? No such luck here. So email would appear to be sent, but it would never be delivered, and no one would know. So you would then wonder, am I being ghosted? I don't even live in Vegas. So the journey began, because clearly this was not going to work. If it said sent, it should be sent. If it failed, it should tell you it failed. First, I needed to find out who to even ask about this. Why were my emails not getting through? This being Silicon Valley, there was a tendency to send email externally. That's the way it was. This was my initial introduction to the really IT company, whatever it was actually called. The actual name still escapes my memory today. I even searched on the internet. There's no mention of it. It's probably something annoying. And the long, very long road, a long and winding road, in fact, to some sort of resolution. The number that sticks in my mind is 7 months from the first report when I actually said, hey, why is this not working? To actual solution implementation. 7 months. First bit of useful info, and this had been something somewhat common in those early days, even with CCmail, was addressing with a gateway extension to the email address. So this is not common at all today, and was a throwback to the pre-internet messaging days across the universities and DARPA agencies and whatnot, and that was in the Wikipedia article. Even with CCmail, given its deployed base, it factors into an addressing scheme, right? So it's one that was known, and there were others. By this late date, the Silicon Valley universe was on board, certainly, with the ARPANET name at symbol, and then the domain format of email addresses that we all know and use today. It was conceived way back when in the 70s, as you will find if you read that Wikipedia article. So here we were leaving this address decision to the user. So in other words, you had to know as a normal person, as a sales or marketing or accounting person, I need to send an email to some other external vendor or whomever. Oh, that's right. I need to add at symbol SMTP _ gateway to the email address. All we had to do was add that to outgoing emails if they were addressed to someone outside of Philips, and the email would be sent and delivered. Piece of cake. This was actually also something in CCmail, if I remember correctly, but it was so much less common 6 years earlier. Forgetting to do this or not knowing would still send the email, but it would not be delivered, and this was happening often enough to be a real communication problem. Did you get my email? It was supposed to work. It did not. So there was a workaround and some blame. I will point out that I'm compressing some of the 7 months here because it was a lot of time was spent trying to find someone who would actually be responsive instead of just saying, oh, you're just doing it wrong. Just add the SMTP gateway thing. And, but I was more interested in, well, why is this happening? Because if people forget, you should get an error. Oh, no, just add this thing and everything's fine. Yeah, so all we had to do is add the suffix. If I wanted to email me here today, I would send email to dhugo at symbol quagglingsand.com at symbol SMTP underscore gateway, GATEWAY, and all would be well. People forgot such things though, or maybe they just didn't know, oh, am I supposed to add it to this? Or what's the, and I think the big one would be if you already had someone in your contacts list, in your address book, in your Lotus Notes address book, you may only see their name and it would fill in the address later. So you may not know that you did not add the SMTP gateway. There you go. And without an error message, and this was important, there was no, I need to add that suffix, which meant the problem was not really solved, even though there was this solution. And really, it's more of a workaround. I mean, it's an explicit routing, source routing piece of information to add to an address. It shouldn't be necessary. Computers can do these things on their own. Lotus Notes was a capable database platform with a programming language, or maybe a scripting language really, to enable automation and whatnot. So I did a little research. I did not know anything about Lotus Notes prior and found that I could insert some code that would run after I hit send, but before a message was actually sent. I could have my little piece of code examine recipient lists, so the to, the CC, the BCC, carbon copy, blind carbon copy, and see if there were any of the now ubiquitous email addresses found. The format is pretty straightforward at this point. This was, there are entire presentations on how email addressing is actually trickier than it seems, but we were going for the 80%. So checked for like at least one character and an at symbol and another one character and a period and at least one other character, right? Very, very basic. And it would tack on that suffix. So this helped to make sure that the addresses were fixed up, as we say, prior to sending. And my little script caught on with some VPs who were having the same exact problem upstairs. Yeah, people aren't getting my emails. And not so the knowledge of adding that suffix at SMTP underscore gateway was not ubiquitous either. So, hey, there is a way to enable this, that not people just aren't hearing about it. They're not learning about it. Or they did know about it and they kept forgetting. So, okay, this works. The script had to be like 5 lines. Not much going on there, but I had to go to your computer. I don't know that there was a way to distribute Lotus Notes scripting tools, Lotus Script probably. So I just went to people's computer and said, here's what I'm doing, paste it in, here's what it does. Okay, done. So I probably did it to like a dozen computers for people and they were very happy. It worked. And I heard about it. Oh yeah, hey, now it's working. It's great. Thank you. Appreciate it. I was accused at some point of placing a virus on vice president computers. Really? Yes, it was them, or rather the on-site rep overseeing our VPs and their underlings from Really. See how that name works? Really? With regard to all things IT. So this person probably viewed me as like a troublemaker and, oh, he's putting viruses on your machine. Don't let him do it. Everybody knew that this was not true, but they tried to make this case anyway. All I knew for sure was my script helped to solve my problem. If others wanted to buy this CYA virus story and not push for a real solution from Really, that was on them. The root cause of all this was still yet to be determined, though it would be. Getting out and about, as I was wont to do, I had visited the NAT lab and the Laboratorium in Eindhoven, which is now no longer a Philips property. It's like the Eindhoven Innovation Center, I think it is. Pretty cool, actually. I've been there post Philips. And Philips Research Lab in Red Hill. So that was in Holland, Eindhoven, Holland, and Red Hill, England. Red Hill is in Surrey, England, respectively. And while we were not discussing email so much because we were following the preferred Philips culture protocol, meeting in person, get on a plane, fly to England. Why do email when you can just... But it was becoming clear that different Philips sites in different parts of the various companies around the world, Philips Research was separate from Philips Components, and there were others as I have forgotten now. They had different email experiences. Some worked, some did not. I was not getting global survey data. I was not, my mission was not to ask everyone, although nowadays you could. But my sense was this was solvable if I could track down someone who was not going to throw politics up as a smokescreen and try to blame me for creating viruses or who knows what. For some reason, maybe a culture thing or maybe CYA, who knows, I was running into this disbelief issue with the really people, which they could hand wave away with just to add the gateway thing to the address. And that passes the solution back to the user. Like, we don't have to fix it. We just have to tell you the workaround, and now it's your problem. There is a comedic bit, maybe a meme now of some sort, where the solution to their problem is, well, don't do that. It hurts when I do this. Well, don't do that. It was a visit to Red Hill in England, sitting in my room at the hotel down the street from the PRL site, Philips Research Lab, dialing into the Philips Components mail server that I had my own aha moment. I think it was my dial-up number choice, perhaps, because Philips being global, that you could dial into England, an England number, a local England number, or a local US number, etc. Somehow I was able to send my email using standard internet addressing without the gateway suffix, and messages were delivered. So this was based on my conversations. Oh, we don't have to add that. Oh, yeah, we do. So what's the difference? This in itself was no major discovery. We were already seeing this variable behavior, but now I had a way to get around that disbelief issue and get really to lean in at long last. Obviously, I could have discovered this while I was in the US if I had dialed into the England server, but this was not the normal thing, right? I'm in the US, I'll use the US number. I'm in England, I'll use the England number. What if I am in England and I use the US number? So I started comparing. That's how things work. So we were nearing the 7-month mark. So I think I've chopped out a chunk of silliness in the middle there. I could send the really people email internally, of course, using Lotus Notes or through the gateway addressing scheme. So I could send it wasn't really.com. I wish I could remember it because it's good to be able to avoid that stuff. It was probably like royal.com. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Really, question mark, exclamation point. Or sometimes using their internet address. So user at really.com. I wonder if it was .co. Like Holland or something. Anyway, using their internet address, but not using the gateway suffix, as I was finding in England with my example. So I could email these people sometimes with, sometimes without that at SMTP gateway thing. So I sent a couple of emails to someone at really, not the person who had accused me of inserting virus code in VP computers. There was some sort of a power trip going on there, who knows? But someone who was actually knowledgeable but not empowered to pursue this until now. Basically, I was able to have emails going between our internet email addresses with and without, little typo there, with and without the suffix, except in the case where I was connected to the US dial-up number and with this other person actually able to do some log examinations to see what was happening. We were able to determine that the problem was real and, believe it or not, fixable. I could almost hear the aha moment in one of the responses, which was basically, the address is wrong. Here, from a somewhat faded memory, is what was happening. Email from our site, so in San Jose, and others, so who knows where, Philips Components maybe, who knows. It depends on who was configuring what, where. So email from our site was sent from a particular Notes installation, Lotus Notes, the server components and the gateway routing and all this stuff, that was configured to send external email addresses through a mail server in, wait for it, England. So if you did not add the add SMTP gateway thing, it would send it to the server in England and then nothing. Adding the add SMTP gateway suffix would explicitly advise the server to treat an address as external and route email through a gateway, just as the name suggests. So this would advise this infrastructure, like, oh, this message needs to be handled in a different way. You can add rules on the server side to take care of this, but this, in our case, it was left to the user to do this or not to do it. Some installations were configured to handle this routing automatically, and some were not. And then, of course, as I just mentioned, ours was not. And so this is one of those, like, how do you convince someone that the server configuration is wrong or seems to be wrong if you don't have all this information? So you really have to take notes. Email routed through England, the England server, wherever it was, without this configuration on our end. So if I didn't add SMTP gateway, and I sent email to myself or whatever, it would not be routed through this gateway, and so would never be delivered. It would actually get stuck. It would get stuck waiting. SMTP, the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, it uses something called store and forward. So email would sit in this on the server in England for some amount of time, and then apparently just get thrown away. That's a good time. There was some case, which eludes my recollection today, where my sender address, that is the from part of an email message, was actually changed to a server address in England, which I didn't have an email address on. So if someone replied to that, it would bounce back to them. There's no user. And it would not get to me. Basically, different installations were configured differently, running different rules to route email, so that some worked, some sort of worked, some failed silently. Sometimes an address was changed, as in that one case I just mentioned, and so on. I am fairly certain it was the person I was corresponding with receiving an email with the altered from address, which was unreplyable, that finally got us to the aha moment in a visible way. An actual demonstration of how me sending you like, hey, this worked, see how this works, I added the thing, see how that works, this does not work. And then there was a little, so tenacity is that I have found that people are, in general, resistant to diving into reported problems. Often this is a classic loser error. Loser is spelled L-U-S-E-R. It's a little joke between horrible software engineers. It's not, I don't like that error. I don't use that term, but loser error. The error is between the keyboard and the chair, that kind of stuff. Must be the dumb users, where they believe some user out there has no idea what they are doing, but they are doing it wrong. This was most of the issue with I think, most of the reason the path to solving the problem took so long. 7 months or thereabouts is unreasonable, but it was also somewhat educational. I needed better test cases to demonstrate the problem, not just a verbal description to a management level person who was only there to divert my attention to, don't bother me, kid. Obviously, the other reason to avoid deep dives is the problem might not be the user. You mean we're going to have to do work? We're going to have to admit that we did something wrong? How's that going to impact our billing? We're going to have to update our invoices. In this case, perhaps there was some concern, some knowledge in the management meetings that they had some infrastructure issues that they were not able to solve or not able to debug or whatever the case. I think if you're telling users, oh, you have to handle this special case in an age and Philips prided itself on being a high-tech and highly accomplished, well-accomplished company, and they were. You would think their IT people would say, you know what, this seems like a problem we can solve. We got the computers. So whatever the case, I have no insight here, and I typed I have on insight here because that's how I roll. I have no insight here, though it appears that this may have been a factor because it was infinitely fixable. It was literally a configuration error, inconsistent configurations across a multitude of servers that were sending each other email to forward and to route and so on, and they just didn't test it, or it didn't work, and they didn't know how to examine the problem. No one in a back room somewhere with a red swing line stapler, of course, was saying, I know that email addresses are not being routed correctly, and somebody's going to listen to me someday. Ultimately, this configuration was fixed. Email was routing and addressed and functioning properly, and I departed Philips to work at a startup. So gather data, examine evidence, make a case. Do not waste time with pointing fingers in meetings. Usually you'll be pointing fingers at people who don't care, who their main job is to point them back at you. Lesson learned. So that's my adventures at Philips. Again, Philips was a silly company to work for anyway, but yeah, it took months and months. I chopped a lot of that out. It was mostly just back and forth with like, no, you're making the problem. You're the error. Oh, it's your fault. So yeah, good times. Anyway, that's the story. There have been similar variations on this. My DSL connection with Pac Bell when we were one of the first 50 installations in Sunnyvale. Gail was our customer rep to handle the specific customer issues. But once we got back into normal customer mode with normal billing and customer support and whatnot, there was nobody who would take error reports seriously. They just figured, oh, it's your problem. So there again, I had to do some logging. So I wrote a script to ping a gateway. So gateways are always a problem. to determine when the connection was going on. It took over a year, I think, of silly finger pointing and so on, until someone realized, oh, your Alcatel modem needs a firmware update. Whoopsie. Be tenacious. Don't gather evidence, though. Have evidence and repeatable experiments to say, this is the problem, and it's not mine. Lesson learned. Okay, that's it. Thank you for listening. As always, take care. And yeah, I'll come up with another story for next week. Take it easy.